I remember the first time she looked at me like that. Not as a neighbor, not as a friend of the family, not as someone much younger than her. It was different, like her gaze had settled a little too long, almost by accident, and neither of us knew how to step away from it. Her name doesn't matter here. What matters is the way she carried herself, elegant without trying, a woman in her mid-40s who had lived enough life to wear confidence like a second skin. But there was something else too, a flicker beneath the surface, a kind of softness she rarely let anyone see. And me, I was 20, still trying to figure out the edges of who I was. But around her, every sharp corner inside me seemed to quiet. I noticed things about her no one else did. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was searching for words, or the small tremor in her hand when she reached for her glass, as if the weight of silence pressed heavier than the drink itself. That night, it was just us. The world outside felt distant, muffled. The air between us wasn't empty, it hummed. A lamp cast a low, amber glow across the room, and in that light, she looked both untouchable and heartbreakingly human. Her hand brushed mine. Not enough to be deliberate, not enough to be an accident either. My pulse leapt, though I tried not to show it. She drew in a breath, slow and careful, and for a moment I thought she'd pull back. Instead, her fingers lingered, light as air, and I knew she felt it too. The current neither of us had asked for, but neither of us could ignore. "You're too quiet," she said, her voice low, almost teasing, but there was something else behind it. A test, maybe, or a plea. I swallowed. "Maybe I'm just listening." She laughed softly, shaking her head, but her eyes never left mine. They searched me, steady and unblinking, as though she was trying to decide if I was someone she could trust with the parts of herself she never revealed. Then she leaned closer, not much, but enough that I could feel the faint warmth of her breath. "I've never told anyone this before," she whispered, each word carrying weight, as though admitting it aloud might break something. The room seemed to tighten around us. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the old clock, everything fell away. There was only her voice, her nearness, the question unspoken. My chest tightened. I could have laughed it off, could have pretended I didn't understand the gravity of the moment. But I didn't. I couldn't. "Then tell me everything," I said, my voice lower than I meant it to be. Her eyes softened, but they didn't let go of mine. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world held still. Her lips parted as though she might begin, and my hand, without permission, shifted just slightly toward hers. The distance between us was a breath, no more. I could see the faint line of worry at the corner of her mouth, the hesitation in the way her lashes fluttered as if she was bracing herself. And then, the sound of the front door opening cut through the moment like a blade. We both froze. She drew her hand back in one swift, practiced motion, her posture straightening as though nothing had happened. But the look she gave me before she turned away told the truth. Something had started, and neither of us could pretend otherwise. I should have left after the door opened. That would have been the smart thing to do, slip away, pretend the charged silence between us had never existed. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed. The sound of voices carried faintly from the hallway before fading, leaving us alone again. She leaned against the edge of the table, her arms crossed, her gaze set somewhere far beyond the walls. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined everything, her hand on mine, the words she almost said. Then she exhaled, long and unsteady. "I shouldn't have," she stopped herself, lips pressing into a thin line. "Shouldn't have what?" I asked quietly. Her eyes found mine, sharp and tired all at once. "You're too young to get tangled in my mess." The words landed heavier than I expected. I wanted to ask what mess, but she already looked like she regretted saying even that much. So instead, I let the silence stretch. I thought of the little things she'd let slip in the past. Offhand mentions of late nights alone, the unopened wine bottles gathering dust in her kitchen, the photographs on her mantel with someone cut out of the frame. She carried her loneliness like perfume, subtle, lingering, impossible not to notice once you were close enough. I wanted to tell her I didn't care about the years between us. But the truth was, I did. 20 and 40-something. The math was simple, the implications not. People would talk. They'd make her feel like a scandal, and me like a boy playing with fire. I glanced at her hand, resting against the table's edge, knuckles pale where she gripped the wood. My own hand twitched, aching to close the distance. I didn't. "You think I don't see the way you look at me?" she said suddenly. Her voice was low, steady, but her fingers betrayed her, drumming softly, nervously, against the wood. Heat crept up my neck. And how do I look at you? She let out a quiet laugh, but it was brittle, like glass under pressure. She stepped closer, close enough that the faintest brush of her sleeve grazed my arm. Like you're trying not to. Her nearness made my throat dry. The scent of her, faint citrus mixed with something warmer, was dizzying. She tilted her head slightly, her breath ghosting against my cheek as though daring me to move. But then, just as quickly, she stepped back. Her eyes darted away, searching for safety in the shadowed corners of the room. I should have said something then. Something clever, or bold, or at least steady. But all I managed was, maybe I'm not very good at hiding. That made her pause. She turned back to me, and for once, she didn't laugh or scold or change the subject. She simply reached out, her fingers brushing lightly against my shoulder, resting there just long enough to feel like a promise. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even an embrace. But in that touch, brief, careful, unfinished, I felt the bond tighten between us, fragile and unspoken. And I knew we were already too far in to turn back. The days that followed blurred together, but each one carried a shadow of her. I caught myself replaying the smallest details. Her hand on my shoulder, the look in her eyes when she said I saw too much. That evening, I found myself at her door again. I told myself I had a reason, an excuse about returning a book she had lent me, but the truth was, I just wanted to see her. She opened the door, hair loosely pinned back, a sweater falling gently off one shoulder. She looked tired, but when her eyes met mine, something shifted in her face, like she hadn't expected to see me yet didn't want me to leave. You shouldn't, she began, but her voice faltered. I know, I said quickly, though I didn't move. For a long moment, she simply held the door, her body angled as though torn between keeping me out and pulling me in. Then she sighed and stepped aside. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with the faint scent of tea and rain-soaked air from the window she'd left open. We sat on the couch, close enough that our knees nearly touched. Every word felt unnecessary, so instead we filled the silence with glances, unfinished thoughts, the sound of our breathing. And then, a knock at the door. She stiffened instantly, shooting me a look that froze me in place. Without a word, she pressed her hand lightly against my chest, urging me to stay quiet, still. She crossed the room, answering with practiced calm. A neighbor stood outside, holding a misplaced package. Their conversation was brief, ordinary. Yet I sat there, pulse hammering, every second stretching longer than it should. When she closed the door again, she leaned against it, shoulders tense. Slowly, her eyes lifted to mine. We didn't laugh. We didn't speak. The weight of what almost happened settled between us. She walked back, slower this time, and sat beside me again. But now the distance was gone. Her thigh brushed mine, her arm warm against my sleeve. You see how dangerous this is, she whispered. I nodded. And yet here we are. Her lips parted as if to protest, but no words came. Instead, her hand shifted, grazing my knee, lingering there just long enough to make my breath catch. I turned toward her, close enough now to see the faint curve of a scar near her temple, close enough to count the lashes framing her lowered eyes. The silence thickened. My hand moved on instinct, brushing against hers, resting lightly on her wrist. She didn't pull away. For one suspended heartbeat, we leaned toward each other. Her breath touched my skin, warm, uncertain. My chest tightened, every nerve alive with the possibility. But then, she turned, pulling back at the last second, her hand slipping from mine. I swallowed the ache of it, but the space between us didn't widen. If anything, it tightened, sharper, charged. Neither of us kissed the other. But the way we sat there, closer than ever, resisting and failing at the same time, felt like we already had. I don't know who moved first that night, her or me. But suddenly the distance that had kept us safe was gone. We were in her kitchen, the only light coming from the lamp above the sink. Rain tapped against the window, the world outside blurred and distant. She stood close enough that I could feel the heat of her body, though she hadn't touched me yet. Why do you keep coming back? She asked, her voice unsteady, sharper than before. I hesitated. Because you don't want me to leave. Her breath caught, a quiet sound that gave her away. She shook her head, but it wasn't conviction, it was defense. You're too young. You don't understand what this could do to me. I stepped closer. My hand hovered, then finally brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't move, didn't stop me. Her skin was warm, softer than I'd imagined, and the act felt both dangerous and necessary. I know exactly what this is, I said quietly. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when they opened, they glistened, conflicted. You shouldn't look at me the way you do. Then stop looking back, I murmured. The silence that followed was unbearable. She leaned against the counter, but the way her shoulder brushed mine made the air feel thin. I could smell the faint citrus of her perfume mixed with the dampness of rain, a combination that made my pulse stutter. Her hand lifted, almost without thought, resting lightly on my chest. The weight of it was slight, but it rooted me in place. I've tried to tell myself this is nothing, she whispered. But it's not, is it? I shook my head. No, it's not. Her lips parted. I could feel her hesitation, the war inside her between fear and desire. The kitchen seemed to shrink around us, pulling us closer until our foreheads nearly touched. You don't know what you're asking for, she said, her voice trembling. I know what I want. I replied, my breath brushing against her ear. Her fingers tightened on my shirt, pulling me closer, and for the first time she didn't step back. She leaned into me, her temple against my jaw, her breathing uneven. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to press my lips against her skin. Every heartbeat was a question, every inch of space a dare. Tell me to leave, I said, though my voice broke as I said it. She didn't answer. Instead, her hand slid higher, curling lightly around the back of my neck. The world narrowed to that one point of contact. The warmth of her touch, the unspoken permission it carried. My hands trembled as they found her waist, careful, reverent. She lifted her face then, eyes searching mine, close enough that her lips hovered a breath away. God help us, she whispered. And just as our mouths were about to meet, we didn't kiss that night. Not really. But the space between almost and nothing was enough to unravel us both. The next day, I told myself I wouldn't go back. I needed distance, perspective, a reason to breathe again. Yet, when the evening came, I was there, standing at her door, heart pounding like I had no choice in the matter. She opened slowly, as though she'd been expecting me. Her eyes flicked past me, checking the hallway, before settling on mine. There was tension in her shoulders, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. Come in, she whispered. Her living room felt different, charged, almost fragile. We sat across from each other this time, the table between us a fragile attempt at space. Then she said it, quiet, but sharp enough to split me in half. Someone saw us. The words sank like stone. My breath caught. Who? She shook her head, pressing a hand to her temple. It doesn't matter. A neighbor. They asked me if you'd been around often. I brushed it off, but her voice trailed, heavy with the weight of everything she didn't say. The room went silent. I watched the way her fingers curled around her glass, knuckles pale, the tremor she couldn't control. She looked strong, but the fear underneath was clear. Fear not for herself, but for me, for what people might say about her. I don't care what they think, I said, leaning forward. She laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was despair. That's because you're 20. You think the world can't touch you yet. I wanted to argue, but her eyes stopped me. They weren't cold. They were terrified. And beneath that terror, I saw something else, desire she couldn't cage anymore. She stood, restless, pacing the room. I followed with my gaze, watching the way her sweater slipped off her shoulder, the way her hand brushed against the wall for balance. I rose too, and when she turned sharply, we collided, her chest brushing mine, her breath catching against my collarbone. Neither of us moved away. Her hands pressed lightly against me, not to push, but to steady herself. My own hovered at her waist, trembling with restraint. Tell me this is wrong, I whispered, though my voice broke on the words. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, she closed her eyes, leaning her forehead briefly against mine. The smallest surrender. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. I can't. Not anymore. The air between us collapsed. My hand slid up her back, her fingers tightening in the fabric of my shirt. Every nerve in my body screamed for release, for the kiss that had been burning between us for days. But she pulled back suddenly, her breathing ragged, eyes blazing with something between desire and panic. We don't get to be careless, she said, trembling. I swallowed hard. Then we'll be careful. Her silence was answer enough. She didn't step away. And I knew. We were already past the point of return. The storm outside hadn't stopped all night. Rain streaked down the windows. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance. And the house seemed suspended in a hush, as if holding its breath with us. She stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the storm but not really seeing it. I stayed near the couch, my body wound tight, waiting for something I couldn't name. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, we can't take it back. Her voice was quiet, but each word landed with weight. I moved closer, slowly, until I was standing just behind her. The air between us was charged, my chest rising and falling too fast. I could smell her perfume, faint citrus mixed with something warmer, deeper. I know, I said. My voice came out lower than I meant, almost a whisper. She turned then, and suddenly we were inches apart. The storm framed her in flashes of light, but my focus was on her eyes, wide, searching, uncertain. Her breath brushed my lips, shallow and uneven. You're too young to throw yourself at this kind of fire, she said, though her hands betrayed her, hovering near my chest, trembling. Then let me burn, I replied. Her face faltered, the careful mask cracking. And in that moment, we both stopped pretending. I lifted a hand, brushing her hair back from her cheek. My fingers lingered, tracing lightly against her skin. She leaned into the touch, barely, but enough. The sight of it broke something inside me. Her hand slid up, clutching at my shirt, pulling me closer. Our foreheads touched, breaths tangled. The room felt too small, the world too loud, everything collapsing into this single, impossible moment. I shouldn't, she whispered, though her lips were already hovering near mine. Then don't say it, I whispered back. The silence between us screamed. My hand found the curve of her back, drawing her against me, while hers tightened with desperation. We stood there, trembling, the choice hanging like a blade. Walk away, or fall. And then she kissed me. It wasn't perfect, messy, raw, too much and not enough all at once. A collision more than a surrender, but it was real. Her breath shuddered against me, her fingers gripping like she'd been holding this back for years. I kissed her back, every ounce of restraint breaking, every fear burning away. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke at first. Her forehead rested against mine, both of us gasping quietly, both of us undone. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Now you know." And I did. I knew her loneliness, her fear, her longing. I knew what she risked, what I risked. And I knew I would choose it again, no matter the cost. We didn't need more words. In that silence, I understood. Whatever came next, we were no longer pretending. The storm passed sometime before dawn. By the time light crept through the curtains, the house was hushed, filled with the faint smell of rain-soaked earth. She sat at the edge of the couch, her hair loose now, her sweater slipping from one shoulder. I was beside her, not touching, but close enough that every small shift in her breath brushed against me. Neither of us spoke for a long while. The night had changed everything. Yet the silence felt strangely gentle, as though words might break something we didn't want to lose. Finally, she sighed, her voice soft. "You should be waking up in your own bed right now. Not here." I glanced at her, catching the tired curve of a smile on her lips. "Do you want me to leave?" Her eyes lingered on mine, searching, testing. But instead of answering, she reached across the space between us, her hand brushing against mine before slipping into it. Her fingers were warm, steady despite the tremor I felt beneath her skin. "Want and should," she murmured, "are rarely the same thing." The weight of that truth settled over us. She'd spent years protecting herself with logic, with the boundaries people expected of her. But now, sitting here, she wasn't hiding anymore. I turned her hand gently, pressing my thumb across her knuckles. She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into me, her shoulder finding mine, her head resting softly against it. "I don't care about the years between us," I said quietly. She gave a small laugh, not mocking but weary, touched with something tender. "Maybe that's because you haven't lived enough of them yet." I tilted my head toward hers, speaking low, steady. "Then let me live them. With you." The words hung there, fragile, daring. For a moment, I worried she might push me away again. But she didn't. Instead, she exhaled and lifted her hand to my face, brushing her thumb across my cheek with a tenderness that cut through every hesitation. You don't make this easy, she whispered. Neither do you. That made her laugh. A real laugh this time, warm and unguarded. She leaned in, her forehead pressing lightly to mine. Not a kiss, not this time. Something quieter, something more certain. We stayed like that, close, breathing the same air, until the morning light softened everything around us. It wasn't dramatic or reckless anymore. It was simply us. Her hand remained in mine, her body pressed gently against my side. Whatever doubts we carried, whatever storms might come, we knew the truth now. We weren't pretending. We weren't hiding. We had chosen this. And somehow that was enough. Speech Balloon, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?